In recent years, with rising living standards, our ways of leisure have diversified dramatically. One popular pastime is outdoor travel, where groups of enthusiasts, often referred to as trekkers, head off the beaten path with tents, mats, and basic cooking equipment to explore remote forests or uncharted territories, enjoying nature's beauty. However, along with the thrill of adventure comes ever-present danger. Losing one's way or encountering aggressive animals can range from requiring a hospital visit to leaving permanent injuries, or worse, never returning from the wilderness. While these risks can often be mitigated with experience, there's one peril no amount of preparation can avoid: supernatural encounters. Trekkers, as a group, are particularly prone to such incidents, and many might have encountered them to some degree. The randomness of these events is striking. Simply visiting the wrong place at the wrong time can lead to an encounter. For ordinary people, there's little recourse. Those with good luck might find an expert to resolve the issue, but those less fortunate could find themselves haunted, drained of energy, and plagued by persistent illnesses. Today's story revolves around a strange incident during an outdoor trek. Local enthusiasts may have heard whispers about it. For clarity, I will narrate this story in the first person. It was the summer of 2009. A friend of mine, a fellow outdoor enthusiast, visited my home to share a bizarre tale. That June, he organized a group of 7 trekkers for an outing near a small town in Colorado, close to the Eight Springs Valley, a scenic, untouched area reputed to reveal its beauty only on sunny days. The group set out from Denver one evening, reaching their destination the following day. After a long hike, the group decided to camp in a cornfield with permission from a nearby resident. Curiously, though it was peak harvest season, the field had been cleared, leaving only stock remnants. They thought little of it and set up camp, then spent the evening taking photos, laughing, and cooking by a campfire before retiring early. The next morning, they awoke to find one member, Alex, lying outside the tent in a bizarre and uncomfortable position. No amount of calling could rouse him until someone splashed water on his face. Laughing it off as sleepwalking, they didn't think much of it. After breakfast, the group planned to visit Eight Springs Valley, but Alex declined, complaining of a headache. He opted to stay behind and rest in the tent while the others left for the day. When they returned at sunset, Alex was missing. Panicked, they searched the area and eventually found him wandering out of the nearby bamboo grove, disoriented and unwell. That night, they camped again, intending to leave the following morning. Yet, when they awoke, Alex was once again outside the tent, his body contorted unnaturally. Uneasy but unsure what to make of it, the group packed up and returned home. A week later, the team gathered at another member's house to share photos from the trip. While reviewing the pictures, my friend noticed something chilling. In one group photo, taken from the same angle as another, a white garment appeared hanging from a tree branch in the background. In the second photo, taken mere moments later, the garment was gone. Disturbed, my friend saved the images and showed them to me. The white garment wasn't just any piece of clothing. It resembled a traditional burial robe often used in old rural traditions. Subtle yet unmistakable, its ghostly presence was undeniable. Determined to investigate, I convinced my friend to add me to their trekking group chat. Over the next week, I casually engaged the other members in conversation, subtly probing for details about the trip. Alex's behavior particularly intrigued me. His messages were erratic and nonsensical, a mishmash of unrelated thoughts. A few days later, the group organized a meetup at a local restaurant. Surprisingly, Alex didn't attend. We learned he had been hospitalized due to severe psychological stress. The group, though shocked, couldn't help but recount the strange happenings during the trip. One member confessed to having dreamt of someone pulling their leg throughout the night. Another heard eerie, sobbing sounds. Others described the haunting wail of wind through the bamboo grove. While no one explicitly linked these occurrences to the supernatural, their unease was palpable. I decided to visit the campsite myself. My friend accompanied me, serving as both guide and co-investigator. Arriving at the cleared cornfield, we set up camp as they had. Nearby lay the bamboo grove where Alex had been found. As we entered, a peculiar atmosphere engulfed us. The air seemed heavier. the surroundings eerily vibrant with an unnatural green hue. The grove, though beautiful, felt otherworldly, as if silently watching us. From the lay of the land, I noted the proximity of a small creek to the campsite. The bamboo grove lay to the west, its dense foliage casting an ominous shadow over the area. As the investigation unfolded, unsettling clues emerged, details I'd prefer not to recall. Yet one thing was clear. Some places are better left unexplored, their secrets buried in whispers and shadows. To the northeast of the cornfield lay a bamboo grove. Between the cornfield and the grove were shrubs and patches of barren farmland. As I ventured about 200 meters into the grove, heading further northeast, I stumbled upon 4 stone graves standing side by side. From the inscriptions on the tombstones, 2 belonged to brothers, while the other 2 were father and son. Judging by the wear and tear, the graves seemed quite old. In rural areas like this, especially among mountain communities, it's common for people to bury their loved ones in shaded areas under trees. Initially, I thought it might just be a coincidence until I noticed a crack on the son's grave, running from the tombstone to the top. It wasn't too big or small, just enough to catch the eye. There's an old saying, "A cracked grave sends shivers through even the bravest dogs." It implies that spirits emerging from such cracks are so unsettling that even dogs, believed to ward off evil, would be frightened. Across regions, interpretations of cracked graves vary, but none see it as a good omen. This crack might have been a bad sign, potentially tied to the eerie occurrences we were about to experience during our trip. Retracing my steps, I began to sense trouble and told my friend we absolutely couldn't camp in the cornfield that night. As I observed the area from another angle, I noticed that the cornfield was surrounded by mountains on all sides, lush and overgrown, with only a narrow gap to the west where a stream flowed out. This topography is considered inland in feng shui, a damp and shadowy place that often attracts spirits. Despite having no concrete evidence, I felt it was safer to pack up and leave. My friend suggested finding shelter in a nearby village. I agreed, and we approached a local farmhouse, a classic 2-story wooden home. The first floor housed livestock, while the family lived on the second. A spacious courtyard stretched out front, and a small terrace was used for drying corn. The family agreed to let us set up our tent on their terrace. Summers in the mountains are rife with snakes, so we sprinkled sulfur powder around our campsite, a traditional snake deterrent. Though I feared snakes, I knew a trick. If you accidentally encounter one, just open an umbrella and stand still. The snake, mistaking you for a mythical figure, will avoid you. That evening, we chatted with the host family in the courtyard, gathering bits of local lore. Casually, I steered the conversation toward the 4 graves, suspecting a connection between them and our experiences. My instincts, honed by years of practice, hinted at a deeper link. The elderly farmer explained that the graves were constructed in 1988 and belonged to relatives of the same family, all of whom died that year. Only women, children, and the elderly survived, most of whom later moved to a neighboring village. One exception was a man named George, the son-in-law's younger brother, who still lived in the area. When I pressed for more details, the farmer grew evasive, pretending not to understand. Realizing he was reluctant to speak, I changed the topic and asked where George lived. The next morning, we visited George. Unlike the farmer, George was forthright. He appeared to be in his 40s and invited us to sit in his yard before heading inside to fetch his pipe. His dog, however, wasn't thrilled by our presence, but my stern gaze convinced it to back off. George returned, puffing on his pipe, and began to recount the grave's story. It turned out the cracked grave belonged to his brother-in-law, who died alongside his father and 2 cousins in a coal mining accident back in 1987. Only George survived. While his brother-in-law and 1 cousin's bodies were recovered, the others remained missing. The mining company offered compensation, and the family moved on as best they could. For the missing bodies, the family improvised. They brought back personal items and clothing, creating effigies stuffed with straw, dressed them in burial clothes, and laid them to rest in the stone graves. According to local customs, graves face the direction of death, pointing the deceased toward their final resting place. The graves here face the mine, symbolically guiding the spirits home. Listening to George's tale, I finally understood the connection between the graves and the strange phenomena we experienced. However, one question lingered. What condition was the recovered body in? George, with a heavy heart, used his pipe to trace a twisted figure on the ground. He explained that the body was contorted unnaturally, as if frozen in a moment of terror. Later, my friend whispered to me that one of our companions, Alex, had slept in a similarly twisted position the night before. It all started making sense: the graves, the dreams, the eerie occurrences. To avoid alarming the villagers, I decided to act discreetly. That night, as I marked the graves with red thread to begin my ritual, something shot out from the cracked grave, a large bat or moth that buzzed around me, spewing dust. Feeling overwhelmed and inhaling the dust, I abandoned the ritual and fled. Before leaving, I urged George to plant a robust oak tree in the cornfield directly in line with the graves. This wasn't to block the spirit's path, but to prevent accidental trespassing by the living. The oak, with its rapid growth and vitality, might also balance the spirit's presence. George, seeing my seriousness, agreed. Exhausted, I left the mountains with my friend. On the drive back to Denver, I was too weak to take the wheel, my head pounding and vision blurring. Had it not been for my habit of chanting protective mantras, I might not have made it home. My friend drove while I called for reinforcements to handle the aftermath. Once home, I spent over a month recovering. Months later, I heard Alex had been discharged from the hospital, a relief that reminded me of the unseen efforts of others in my profession. For the first time, I felt pride in my work, viewing it from a broader perspective. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.